What's the creepiest thing you've ever experienced when you've been alone? When I was a kid, I used to spend a lot of time alone in my basement. We had a TV down there, so I was down there pretty late most nights in the summer. One pretty late night, I swear I heard rustling from behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. I felt a really sharp breath on the back of my neck, hard enough to blow my hair. Took off up the steps, leaving everything on downstairs. I grabbed my mom and we went back downstairs to check it out. Everything was turned off. I didn't hang out downstairs anymore. Once my grandma was out of town to visit my uncle who lives in another state. I was watering her plants, feeding her dog, checking her mail, all that stuff. I went inside and her TV was turned on. Turned it off. Went into a different part of the house to water the plants she kept in a den-like area. Walked back through the living room and the TV was on again, this time the Golf Network. My pap loved napping to golf, like every other 60-something on the planet. Turned it off and went about my business. Came back a few days later to repeat this routine and some of her figurines had been turned around. He'd sometimes do this because it annoyed my grandma. Probably not creepy, but it makes me chuckle. Once I was up late on my phone in my bed watching YouTube until I accidentally dropped my phone down the side of my bed. When I went to pick it up I heard a sort of distorted voice saying, "Get back into bed now." It was my parents' basement when I was visiting home during uni. I thought it was haunted. Stuff would vanish or seem to move on its own. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps upstairs when no one was home and investigate and indeed I was alone. Then I started literally missing time and finding myself in different places down in the basement. There were other things. Turned out, carbon monoxide leak and poisoning. I was lucky I wasn't there for extended periods and it was full, so windows were open. I've told this before. My mom works night shifts, so I was home a lot often. I went downstairs to make some dinner and take it back to my room, but before leaving the kitchen I locked the back door. I go upstairs and then I heard this awful bang and scrape noise. I was so scared, but I still went to check what it was. I opened the back door and I saw 3 bouquets of roses. I called my mom crying about it. She said a guy friend came by and wanted to give it to us, mom, sister, me, for Valentine's Day. I told her about how the door was suddenly unlocked and she said that he doesn't have a key. This was years ago at my parents' house. They were out of town for the weekend, so being a coward, I had the doors locked early, blinds shut, lights on in several rooms. Had a banging on my front door, then a minute or so later, something knocking on my window. It was my asshole friend trying to scare me while his wife waited in the car. Here's a funny one. I was home alone at watching TV in the family room. It's a dark and windy night, and I think I hear something thumping outside the patio doors. I figure it's something to do with the wind, so I ignore it. The thumping continues, and suddenly I realize that it sounds like somebody walking on the back patio. The curtains are closed across the patio door, so I get up, walk over, and throw the curtains open. There's a guy standing right on the other side of the glass, looking in. I jump back, terrified, my heart racing. The guy jumps back also. He was as scared as I was, because he was my reflection. I was walking home from a bar one night when I was at uni and heard what sounded like a blood-curdling female scream. I was absolutely petrified, made a cursory glance to see if I could easily see what was going on, but when I couldn't see anyone I sprinted home. It was only months later that I saw a video online and realized what it was. It was a fucking fox. Their screams are horrifying. A friend of mine standing in my yard at 4 AM or so. Was up doing homework. The next day he confessed he had simply been riding through the neighborhood and saw me and tried to catch my attention to wave at me. Super nice guy, hasn't happened since. This happened a few years ago. It was about 9 PM and I was returning from practice. I would say I'm a pretty paranoid guy and usually overthink stuff. As I was walking down the road I had this terrible gut feeling, like my heart dropped. I immediately felt like I should look behind me. I turned around and saw a man, pretty muscular, around his middle 30s, staring at me. I froze and suddenly the same gut feeling returned. I don't know why, but I had that urge to scream. The guy actually took off running, probably because he thought I was calling for help. When I got home I told my parents. I was 14 at the time, and we called the police. A few days later a police officer knocks on our door and starts asking me questions. He had a picture of the guy from that night. I could tell it was him due to him being bald, and from his muscular body. It turns out they had already caught the guy and just wanted to confirm if it was him. I later find out this guy has been guilty for murder, molestation, etc. He was also carrying a knife the night I saw him. Really messed up guy. This is probably going to get lost down in the comment section, but here is my story. Not my house, but my great grandmother's house about 2 years after she died. This was in rural Pennsylvania, and as such, no one really came though, which I guess is why no one was too worried about leaving a 12-year-old home by himself in a place he wasn't familiar with. Anyway, I woke up from a nap to find everyone gone. There was a note in the kitchen which explained they had gone into town to go see a play or something and that if I needed anything to call them. Well, for the first 20 minutes everything was great, but then it started to storm. A really bad thunderstorm hit, and the power went out. The phone was also out, because it was a landline, and we had no power. I'm scared shitless, but somehow managed to find and light candles around the house. Already on edge, I start hearing noises coming from the cellar. I do not know what possessed me to do this, but I decided to go check out the noises. Well, it turns out there was a black snake infestation in the cellar, which no one knew about since hardly anyone went to the cellar anymore after my great grandmother died. Well, after seeing about 5 snakes right at the bottom of the steps slithering around, I lost my will to explore the rest of the cellar and ran back upstairs screaming. I slammed shut the cellar door and ran to hide in the bedroom under the bed. After what felt like hours, although was in reality only about 5 minutes later, I heard a knock on the back door. I thought I was about to be killed by some serial killer or monster, but the knock kept coming. Suddenly, as I'm going to sneak a peek as to who is at the door, I hear the door unlock and someone walk in. I'm about to run screaming, when suddenly I hear a man's voice calling my name. Turns out it was the neighbor who helped my great grandmother out a lot, and he had come over to check on me after my parents had called and told him they couldn't get a hold of me. Turns out the house wasn't possessed, and the snakes had apparently been there for years. That is still the most scared I have ever been. Me and my mom saw someone or something watching us sleep. I was about 5 or 6 years old and my mom was putting me to sleep. I fell asleep, and when I woke up in the middle of the night I saw a dark figure like a man standing in front of the window. I woke my mom up almost about to cry, and I was hoping it was just a tree or something, because we were on the 2nd floor of the house. But when she woke up she also saw what happened, and told me to stay put and don't move. She quickly ran to the living room, because we had guests over and everyone was still up drinking. She told everyone what happened, and for 3 hours everyone went out and searched around the house. What I didn't tell her was that when she left the window started to rattle, as if someone was trying to open it. I was scared and never slept on my own in that room until I was 8. So, I have several experiences. When I was around 12 to 15, I can't really date it better other than I had a weight bench, so I know I wasn't younger. I was in my bedroom. It was late, and the lights were off. I can't remember if I had woken up, or if I was just kind of laying there. Anyways, I happened to open my eyes, and leaning against the end of my weight bench was this shadowy figure. It had no features, but it had a human shape and basically looked like, well, shadow and purple stars, not the elementary school 5-point stars, like looking at the night sky, stars only they were purple. I didn't know what I was looking at, but it waved at me. I don't remember anything else. Second story. I was in Nacogdoches, Texas going to school. Roughly near the SFA campuses was a Taco Bell. Anyways, I walked there for food one evening. I ate, nothing out of the ordinary. When I was done, I started walking back. Well, along the way, eventually you have to cross this super busy street. The particular crosswalk I decided to cross at, where the pedestrian stand is sort of hidden from drivers by the controller box for the traffic lights. So, I'm standing there, waiting for the light to change, so I can cross the street. The light eventually changes, and I go to cross the street. Out of nowhere, and mid-stride, a voice says, "Why don't we just wait a second?" So, I stop, and literally the second I would have stepped into the street, a dude ran the red light at full speed. It would have killed me, horrifically, but a voice from nowhere saved my life. Those are two that come to mind immediately, because they were so profound to me. I have others that, well, they get mocked when I talk about them. It was night, and I had to take a crap. I ran to the bathroom, but I felt the whole room having a weird vibe, and it was cold af being winter and the heater was on. So I went to the bathroom. I didn't close the door, because I had to take this massive shit. 3 minutes in I was on my phone minding my business, until I get a vibe that someone was watching me. From my peripheral vision I swear to God I saw something run across the other room. I thought it was something else, but I looked to the door again, and saw a shadow moving. I wiped, closed, and locked the door, and laid my ass to sleep in the tub with the lights on. I got more scared when I woke up from a loud banging noise, but it was my dad needing to pee. Laying in bed, and you hear the dog door flap back and forth, yet your dogs are on your bed. True story, found out rats like to come in that way, went and got 2 cats, don't hear that anymore. When it was night I always heard my mother coughing downstairs. One weekend my parents and my brother went on a trip together, and I was home alone. And I heard the coughing. So it was not my mom. I was driving with my dad, and we're in the middle of the country. We were approaching an intersection about a 1/4 mile up the road. It was approaching dusk, still plenty of light to see, and we saw a large greyish translucent cloud. If I had to compare it to a shape, my dad and I agreed that it looked most like a Stagico. Random I know, but still, appear out of thin air on the left side of the intersection and slowly cross the road in front of us, and then disappear into thin air after crossing the road. It was so clear to us that my dad pretty much slammed on the brakes. We looked at each other and said, "Did you just see?" Yup. Not sure if it's spooky, but it's something I've never experienced before, and haven't since. Once when I was home alone at night, I was just playing my Xbox, when I noticed at the corner of my eye, that my laptop on the other side of the room had turned the face recognition on. Even though I was nowhere near it, and not in its camera view, and it had been in the same exact position for about an hour without doing anything. Doesn't sound as creepy writing it down now, but I nearly shot it at the time. Thanks for watching, and share your stories. Don't forget to consider the idea to maybe think about potentially subscribing. Peace.